Imagine waking up in a freezing cottage with no heat, no electricity, and no food unless you made it yourself, from scratch. No fridge, no running water, just you, a fire, and whatever you managed to keep from spoiling. That was everyday life in the Middle Ages. For the average person, survival wasn't about having the latest gear, it was about having the right tools. And the truth is, some of the inventions they relied on to stay alive still work today, and might even come in handy if the modern world ever lets us down. In this video, we're looking at 5 medieval survival inventions that didn't just make life easier, they kept people alive. And if you're ever off-grid, in a crisis, or just trying to live more simply, these might be worth learning from. The butter churn. For medieval families with even a single cow or goat, milk was valuable, but it was also fragile. Without refrigeration, it could spoil in a matter of hours. So what did they do? They turned it into something that lasted: butter. The butter churn was a simple tool, but a crucial one. It transformed cream into a dense, fatty block of nutrition that could survive days, even weeks, without spoiling, especially when salted. It was used for cooking, frying, spreading, and in many cases, trading. In cold climates or lean seasons, butter was an essential source of calories and energy. Most churns were just wooden barrels with a plunger, or later, crank-operated paddles. It didn't take much, just time and effort. But the payoff was huge, and here's why it still matters. Even today, in off-grid or emergency situations, having a way to turn perishable food into shelf-stable fat is survival gold. Butter, ghee, and rendered fats are all critical for long-term food storage and energy. You can make your own churn, or even improvise one with a jar and some muscle. In a world where the power can go out, the medieval butter churn is a reminder. Sometimes the simplest tools make all the difference. The hand grain mill. In medieval times, bread wasn't just food, it was life. If you couldn't grind grain, you couldn't eat. That's why nearly every village had some version of a hand grain mill, from massive water-powered mills to small personal grinding stones kept in kitchens. For poor families, especially in rural areas, the quernstone was common. 2 heavy circular stones stacked on top of each other. You'd pour wheat, rye, or barley into the hole in the top, then grind it by rotating the upper stone with a wooden handle. It was slow, tiring work, but it turned whole grains into flour, and that flour became everything: flatbreads, porridge, dumplings, even thickeners for soup. Grain was cheap, flour was valuable. The ability to grind it at home was the difference between going hungry and having something, anything, to stretch the meal. And here's what's wild: it still works. Today, hand crank grain mills are used by off-gridders, homesteaders, and preppers who want control over their food supply. No power? No problem. You can grind your own oats, wheat, corn, even beans, just like people did 800 years ago. Plus, whole grains store far longer than processed flour, so in a long-term emergency, having a grain mill doesn't just give you food, it gives you options. In medieval times, the hand mill wasn't some novelty. It was a survival machine, and honestly, it still is. The tripod cooking stand. Forget stoves, gas burners, or portable propane grills. In the medieval world, if you couldn't cook over an open fire, you didn't cook at all. That's where the tripod stand came in. Simple, sturdy, and smart, the tripod was made of 3 iron or wooden legs bound together at the top with a chain or hook hanging down the middle. From that, you could hang a pot, kettle, or cauldron directly over the flames. It worked whether you were in a cottage hearth, an outdoor fire pit, or the middle of a muddy battlefield. The beauty of the tripod wasn't just that it let you boil water or cook stew, it gave you control over heat. Raise the chain to keep something warm, lower it to bring it to a boil. You didn't need an oven or fancy gear, just a fire, a pot, and a way to suspend it. Today, campers and off-grid homesteaders still use this exact method. Tripod kits are sold for outdoor cooking, but you can also make one from sticks and paracord in a pinch. In an emergency situation, whether the power's out or you're living rough, it gives you a way to cook that's efficient, reliable, and time-tested. In medieval times, this wasn't some camping gimmick. It was how food got made, and it still works anywhere you can build a fire. The clay oven. For many medieval families, there was no such thing as a kitchen. No stovetop, no oven, not even a fireplace in the earliest homes, but people still had to bake bread, roast roots, and feed large households. So they built their own ovens out of one of the oldest materials on Earth, clay. Clay ovens, also called earth ovens or cob ovens, were built using nothing more than mud, straw, and stone. Settlers would shape a dome, often over a form made from sand or sticks, then let it dry in the sun or fire harden it. The design was simple but brilliant. You build a fire inside, let the walls soak up the heat, rake out the coals, and cook your food with residual heat from the hot clay. These ovens could bake bread with crispy crusts, roast root vegetables, and even slow-cook stews and meats. And because they were made from natural, local materials, almost anyone could build one, with no fancy tools or equipment. And guess what? People still use them today. In off-grid communities, backyard gardens, survival retreats, and even fancy outdoor kitchens, clay ovens are making a comeback. They're fuel-efficient, eco-friendly, and surprisingly durable when maintained. If the grid went down tomorrow and you needed a reliable, no-electricity way to cook for your family, a medieval-style clay oven would absolutely get the job done. It wasn't a luxury. It was how people baked bread for centuries. And in a crisis, it still delivers. The Firesteel and Flint Kit. Long before matches, lighters, or magnesium strikers, medieval people had their own way of starting fires, and it was surprisingly effective. It all came down to a piece of steel, a sharp rock, and some char cloth. The Firesteel and Flint Kit was a must-have survival tool for travelers, soldiers, and peasants alike. The method is simple. Strike a piece of high-carbon steel against flint or quartz to shave off tiny hot sparks. If those sparks land on something dry and flammable, like charred cloth, dry fungus, or fine straw, you've got the beginnings of a fire. It wasn't fast, and it definitely took practice. But once mastered, it was reliable, portable, and nearly impossible to wear out. A small pouch with flint, steel, and tinder could be tucked into a belt or pocket and used anywhere, in the woods, in a storm, or in the middle of winter. For people in the Middle Ages, this was life-saving tech. Without fire, there was no cooking, no warmth, and no safety from predators or darkness. The Firesteel kit made sure they could light a fire no matter where they were. And here's the cool part. You can still get one today. Survivalists and preppers often carry Firesteel and flint because it doesn't rely on fuel, batteries, or modern convenience. It's just raw, old-school survival. In a pinch, or even just as a backup, it's one of the most dependable ways to start a fire anywhere on Earth, and it's been that way for hundreds of years. In the Middle Ages, these inventions weren't optional. They were survival. A butter churn meant calories that wouldn't spoil. A grain mill turned raw harvests into real meals. A clay oven fed a village, and a spark from flint and steel could mean the difference between warmth and cold, or life and death. What's wild is that centuries later, these tools still work. They remind us that survival doesn't always come from something new. It often comes from something tested, something proven, something simple. Whether you're into off-grid living, prepping, or just curious how people made it with so little, these inventions show us what's possible with limited tools and a lot of grit. And if the modern world ever fails us, it's not going to be the newest gadget that saves the day. It might just be something medieval. Let me know in the comments, which one of these would you want in a survival situation? And if you want more forgotten survival wisdom from the past, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell. We've got more on the way.